Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
It's a big Saturday of racing. We have graded stakes races all across the country. And one of those places with a couple graded stakes races on the menu is Belmont at the Big A. Let's talk about the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic. Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona as we dive in and take a look at the field. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel right below. That's a big help for all of us. Throw up a like there on that one. David, here's a look at the field, and we have a familiar face in this one, Warlike Goddess, who we've seen a few times in this particular race. A 10-time graded stakes winner will try to get back to the Breeders' Cup once again this year. So just by resume, by a horse who we've seen as a 7-year-old mare now, she's definitely accomplished a lot. She's the one they'll all have to hold off in here.
Yeah, we've seen Warlike Goddess a couple times in this race, and she's won this race a couple of times as she is looking for a three-peat in the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, the mare facing off against the males. I believe no horse has ever won this race 3 times in succession, so she'll be trying to create some history on Saturday, and seems like she's got a pretty good chance to do it.
I'm curious what the pace will be like in this race, David, as we dive into the Timeform US pace projector, because the projector has a manual up front. I mean, just knowing the intent of a lot of these horses, Get Smokin is one of those horses who's pretty quick and who's ridden aggressively for the lead most of the time. And then to the outside, you have Silver Knott, who's become kind of a marathon horse with a lot of tactical speed recently. And Far Bridge actually won his most recent race, kind of stealing it on the front end. I don't think either of the two outside horses are quite as fast as Get Smokin, but when you have these long distance turf races, a lot of time intent is just as important.
Yeah, we see it pretty often. The Timeform US pace projector can get a little bit tripped up in these marathon races because it's measuring how fast the horses have run in their prior starts, and a horse like Emmanuel, who's coming out of mostly shorter races, just naturally going to have faster pace figures than those that have been consistently competing in the marathon races that traditionally have slower paces. So I think that's why you see Emmanuel shown in front of Get Smokin. I think we all expect Get Smokin to be on the lead, and Mark Cassius said as much in his pre-race quotes. This horse has one way to go, and that is to the front.
Well, speaking of Get Smokin, let's start to take a look at this field, and he's the first one that we will meet from the inside. You just see a lot of ones next to his name in the past performances because they do not really want to take him back. This has been from about 7 furlongs all the way to 1.5 miles. He just wants to be on the front end. He'll take him as far as he can go. Multiple graded stakes winner. Some of his big victories, the Grade 2 United Nations, the 2023 Grade 2 Turf Cup over at Kentucky Downs. So, he's kind of an obvious horse. And for us as handicappers, sometimes it's nice when you know the tactics of the horses.
Yeah, I think everyone's happy to see him in this race, especially the connections of Warlike Goddess, because a race that Get Smokin is going to have a little bit of pace. He's not just a horse that goes to the front. He typically sets a pretty honest pace on the lead and is not afraid to open up on the field by several lengths, as we saw him do when he won the United Nations 2 back. And don't get me wrong, he ran well that day, but he was kind of life and death to hold on at the end, going the 1 3/8. Now he's got to get the 1.5 miles. I know he did it once before, but that was kind of over a speed favoring course at Kentucky Downs last year. I think he's going to have to need some help up front, slowing down the pace a little bit if he's going to get this distance, and I'm not sure he's going to have the opportunity to do that.
The number 2 is Daunt. He sort of looks like a big long shot in here, David. He has not hit the board in 6 tries against Graded Stakes Company. And then on the win end, I think he's 0 for his last 13 getting his picture taken.
I'm a fan of this horse. He's one that I like to root for. He typically outruns his odds, but he's a little bit of a stretch to make at this level. He tried Graded Stakes Company in marathon races a couple of times last season, just wasn't good enough. He'd be a big long shot in this race, rightly so.
The number 3 is Emmanuel. He's coming back from Kentucky Downs, where he took a shot for the big money in Mint Millions. Finished 5th that day, was beaten a couple lengths when Goliad was a runoff winner. He's a 5-time graded stakes winner, and he has chased lone speed winners in his last 2. He'll be making his second start for the Maker Barn. What do you think about Emmanuel's chances in here?
Interesting horse. He tried a marathon distance one time before when he finished behind Get Smokin in the United Nations 2 back and got sort of a strange trip that day. It seemed like they didn't have the opportunity to get the forward position this horse usually wants coming out of the starting gate, and kind of forced Irad Ortiz to get him to settle in mid-pack. He moved to the 2-path on the backstretch. It felt like that was the day at Monmouth that you wanted to be on the rail. He ultimately got back down there late and was finishing okay at the end of that race. I wish he did a little bit more for me. First off, the switch to Maker last time, they paid a hefty sum for him, $500,000 at an auction earlier this year, and just couldn't quite get it done going the mile distance. Now Maker stretching all the way out to a mile and a half. He has had success doing this with some horses. We'll see if that's the case for Emmanuel.
Warlike Goddess got caught behind a rabbit last time out in the Flower Bowl. But this is a very accomplished 7-year-old mare. We've seen her, as you pointed out, win this race a few times, and now she's back trying to get herself to the Breeders' Cup once again, where we've seen her run well in both the filly and mare and the turf in previous years. She likes this turf course. She's the one they'll all have to hold off, but we know she's not unbeatable because of her running style. It definitely puts her at a disadvantage.
Yeah, it sounds like from the connections, like this is going to be the penultimate race of her career before they try the Breeders' Cup one last time. You have to admire everything that she's done in her career. But as you say, her one vulnerability is pace. She's very trip dependent because she doesn't have a whole lot of early speed. And she comes with this big late run. But as we saw here, her last race in the Flower Bowl, the entire field let an overmatched rival in Idea Generation get away on the front end. And turns out maybe she wasn't as overmatched as everyone thought she was, because she held on to win that race at, I think, upwards of 30-1. Warlike Goddess, I thought, ran very well in defeat because they crawled up front. Nobody else was closing with the finishing speed that she was. And she's just loves this mile and a half distance. I think her real advantage in this race is that that she just has loads of stamina. Every time she gets to go the mile and a half, it's almost as if the pace doesn't matter as much because she's going to be finishing. She's been successful in this race the past couple of times that she's tried it. She's gotten some pace when the males face off against her. And I think she's the horse to beat once again.
In a day and age when we don't see horses like this come back over and over and over again. It is really cool when you have these familiar names that you just want to root for as a racing fan too. She may not always be the horse to bet, but she's usually the horse they all have to beat. We move to the number 5, Truly Quality, who's a really nice up-and-coming horse right now. David, I think you can go through the form overall, and you can probably toss the one race at the end of last year at Keeneland when the horse just didn't really fire all that much. Everything else is really solid. Lost to a horse 2 starts back named Battle of Normandy, who came right back to win his 3rd start in a row with the 91 Beyer speed figure. He will need to improve to get the better of, I think, some of the top contenders in here, but he is lightly raced and continuing to improve. How do you think Truly Quality fits in this group?
Yeah, I admire what this horse has done since stretching out to the mile and a half, mile and 3/8 distances, because it does seem like he's really stepped forward since getting to go these marathon trips. He even ran pretty well in his first attempt going that far at a mile and a half at Keeneland back in April behind Champagne Juan, when he arguably moved too soon that day, and Champagne Juan came back to just miss in the Belmont Gold Cup against some very nice runners. Since then, he's continued to step forward, as you said. I thought he got an absolutely perfect trip last time in the Colonial Cup. It was kind of a match race between him and Webslinger, and Webslinger found himself in sort of an unfamiliar position setting the pace, and Truly Quality got to just track him in the pocket. So I think that kind of decided the result that day. We'll see if he gets as perfect a trip here. Like you, I thought he had to move forward a little bit, but he does feel like the one in here with upside.
Silver Knott, really intriguing in this race because this is a horse who got very good winning the Elkhorn and the Man of War and the Bowling Green. And then in the Sword Dancer was actually a horse who we were kind of expecting to be on the lead, and Far Bridge ended up breaking on top, getting a little bit aggressive and stealing that race. Silver Knott loomed up at the top of the lane, just a little bit flat and faded. And both of the times he's run into Far Bridge, he's gotten the better of that one. What do you think about Silver Knott, and where do you kind of stack him up in here? Do you think he'll be tracking behind Get Smokin'?
Yeah, I think he's going to track behind Get Smokin' and potentially Daunt or Emmanuel, whichever one of those decides to get aggressive in this race and potentially slot into that 3rd position. A very similar trip, I think, to the one that he got when he was successful 3-back in the Man of War, a race that featured some pace up front. He was able to kind of sit there without any cover, just in no man's land between horses, and you get the jump on that field and hold them off late. My take on his disappointment in the Sword Dancer is that Flavian Pratt made a rare tactical error. He's typically a jockey who doesn't misread pace scenarios, and I think he did that day, because even watching the start of that race, he never showed any intention to go forward with this horse. It's like they just decided beforehand that they were going to cede the lead to somebody, whoever wanted it, and it turned out that was Far Bridge. And when you look back at Silver Knott's races, his weapon is his stamina. He can keep up with fast paces and keep going. And I think they just took away his weapon. He's not a horse that wants to turn races into a sprint to the end, and that's what happened in the Sword Dancer. I think if this is a more truly run race, we'll see him deliver a better effort.
Silver Knott, that's the question. What kind of trip will he get today? Can he bounce back to some of those bigger performances? Let's finish up with Far Bridge, who is a multiple grade 1 winner, David. And he's a horse who had always been a mid-pack to a deeper closer. And as you pointed out, in the Sword Dancer, nobody wanted the lead early on. Far Bridge just had a fine start, and he went on with it. And he was able to kind of clear off a little bit. Silver Knott seemed content sitting second. And at the top of the lane, Far Bridge just was able to put away Silver Knott, and then also able to hold off measured time. So I thought a pretty impressive performance from Far Bridge. But then on the overall scope, are we going to get a type of trip like this? Because this is a horse who had been kind of knocking on the door, but hadn't been a win machine, and was able to get a loose lead. I just don't think that's the trip he's going to get here.
Yeah, I don't see how Farbridge is going to get this trip again with Get Smokin in the race. He's just not nearly as fast as that horse early, and especially drawing the outside post position this time, they're going to have to try to take him back, because when you watch a lot of his races, Farbridge is a horse that likes to lug in. He's a horse that wants to run on the rail every step of the way. That seems like when he runs his best performances, when he gets to work out those ground-saving trips. We'll see if Joel Rosario is able to orchestrate that kind of trip from post 7, even if he has to come from off the pace this time. What he proved in the Sword Dancer is that his United Nations was not a true indicator of where he's at. He got a terrible trip that day, just 3 wide around all 3 turns. When you take that race out of his form, he's competitive with this field. It just feels like last time was the time to have him, when he was 8-1.
Absolutely. That was Far Bridge, who you got a great price on last time out. Let's take a look at the selections now, David, for the Turf Classic. Who are you going to put on top in here? Talk to us about Silver Knott.
Yeah, I just didn't overcomplicate this one. I like the 2 favorites in this race. Warlike Goddess, to me, is the horse to beat, but I do feel that you might finally get a slightly better price on Silver Knott off that disappointment last time, and I just think they made a tactical error in that race, and if they get back to pressing the pace like he was successful doing 2 and 3 back, then he's going to be pretty tough potentially getting the jump on Warlike Goddess.
I was looking for kind of the new face jumping up into stakes company here with Truly Quality. Think you might be able to get a little bit of value there. I have Warlike Goddess underneath, then using Farbridge, who's been able to get the better of Silver Knott the couple times that they've faced, rounding out the field with Get Smokin, who will likely be setting the pace. So David with Silver Knott on top. I'll put Truly Quality on top. However you're playing race 6 at Belmont and Aqueduct on Saturday, the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, we wish you the best of luck.
Hey, let me give you a hot tip. If you liked the content that you've seen before, click on the like and subscribe button right here. And of course, for more DRF videos like Race of the Days, stakes previews, click on the videos right here.